What if I told you that sitting perfectly still, staring at your computer screen right now, might actually be tricking your biology into a profound state of deep meditation?
I mean, that sounds completely counterintuitive.
Right. We usually assume our modern exhaustion is just like mental burnout,
Yeah.
but we might be accidentally triggering these ancient physiological levers without even knowing it. So, welcome to another deep dive. Today, we have a really fascinating mission ahead of us.
We definitely do.
We are pulling from a stack of sources that cover an author's personal reflections, some pretty wild physiological theories, and actually a philosophical teardown of the scientific method itself. All of this is centered around a text simply titled The Science of Meditation.
And to really grasp what we're looking at today, you have to be willing to completely rethink your basic assumptions about what science actually is.
Yeah, and what happens to your body when it stops moving?
The premise of that title alone is enough to give anyone pause. I mean, when you see the science of meditation, you anticipate hard empirical data, right?
Yeah, fMRI scans and peer-reviewed trials and all that.
Exactly. You expect rigidity. But the sources we are looking at present something entirely different and, frankly, a lot more thought-provoking.
The backstory of how this text got its title perfectly illustrates that tension. So originally, the author wanted to name their compiled articles The Essence of Meditation.
Right, seeking the absolute essence of a biological process.
Yeah, the ambition was to drill down to the singular, undeniable biological truth of what is happening inside the human body during meditative states. So they sent a draft to a few readers, including Dr. Stephen Sloman, who is a psychology professor at Brown University.
And seeking that absolute essence is a massively ambitious goal, especially with something as historically elusive as meditation.
Oh, totally. And Dr. Sloman caught that immediately. His feedback was incredibly pivotal. He told the author that while the book had a wonderfully concrete scientific feel to it, he completely rejected the title, The Essence of Meditation.
Because essences don't really exist in this context.
Right. He pointed out that the author's claims weren't proven facts. They were hypotheses. They were unverified theories. So Dr. Sloman suggested a pivot, basically saying to call it the science of meditation instead.
Which is a suggestion that fundamentally challenges our everyday vocabulary. If a text is explicitly built on unverified hypotheses rather than established facts, why would a psychology professor advocate calling it a science book? This raises an important question. What criteria are we actually using to define science?
Okay, let's unpack this, because getting our heads around this definition sets the foundation for, well, everything we are exploring today. In typical conversation, if we are debating a topic and I say, that's not scientific, my underlying meaning is usually just, you are objectively wrong.
Yeah, we treat the word science as a direct synonym for undeniable truth.
We treat it like an encyclopedia of absolute certainties.
But to understand the author's framework here, we have to look through the lens of Karl Popper, who was a remarkably influential philosopher of science from the 20th century.
Oh, right. He flipped that everyday assumption completely upside down, didn't he?
He absolutely did. He argued that scientific theories cannot ever be proven true. They can only be falsified.
Wait, hold on. I'm struggling with that. Are you saying a scientific theory doesn't even have to be true or proven true to be considered science?
That is the core of Popper's philosophy. Falsifiability is the dividing line between science and non-science.
Meaning it has to be testable.
Exactly. It has nothing to do with whether a statement is currently accepted as right or wrong. It is entirely about whether the statement is constructed in a way that allows it to be proven false.
Okay, I see.
If there's no possible observation or experiment that could shatter the theory, it isn't science.
The text brings up Popper's classic white swan hypothesis to illustrate this, and I think it clarifies the concept beautifully. Let's say you live in an isolated region where you have only ever encountered white swans.
Right?
So based on your observation, you propose a hypothesis, all swans are white.
Under Popper's rules, that is a perfectly robust scientific statement.
Even though there are black swans out there.
Yes, because its strength doesn't come from a guarantee of truth, but from its immense vulnerability. It is incredibly easy to falsify. You only need to discover one single black swan, and your entire theory shatters.
And that structural vulnerability is the hallmark of science.
Exactly.
You find the black swan, the theory breaks, and then you just update it. You say all swans are either white or black.
And that new statement remains scientific because someone might eventually find a brown swan.
Right. But, and here's where the logic gets tricky, what if I put forward a different theory? What if I say There are golden swans living somewhere in the universe.
Well, that statement is entirely non-scientific. You can never definitively prove it wrong.
Because if we scour the entire planet and fail to locate a golden swan, the proponent of the theory can simply claim we haven't looked in the right caves.
Or they could say they are invisible to our current technology. Because the claim cannot be falsified, it exists outside the realm of science.
But the text adds a crucial caveat here that I think trips a lot of people up. Calling a statement non-scientific doesn't automatically mean it is incorrect.
Oh, people certainly get defensive about that label. They hear non-scientific and assume it's just a polite way of saying nonsense.
Right, like it's just wrong.
But entire pillars of human experience, like art, religion, profound philosophical inquiries, they are fundamentally non-scientific because they resist rigorous falsification.
The author uses a fantastic example for this, Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa.
Yeah, a painting is not a scientific fact. It operates outside the bounds of falsifiability.
But nobody stares at the Mona Lisa and declares it wrong.
Exactly. It operates in a completely different framework.
So think of science not as a dusty ledger of absolute facts, but as a brutal stress test. If an idea cannot be put into a hypothetical arena where it genuinely risks being destroyed, it's not science.
And that philosophy is the exact justification for the title, The Science of Meditation. The author is offering up their own biological theories and subjecting them to extreme stress tests.
They are basically inviting the destruction of their own ideas.
And they are remarkably transparent about this. They acknowledge that their hypotheses about meditation might never be proven entirely correct.
Right.
However, they guarantee the work is scientific because every claim is left highly vulnerable to falsification. And they start by putting their boldest claim into the arena.
Which is the hypothesis that meditation is, at its biological core, a form of sleep.
Yes. Let's look at that first hypothesis. The author initially proposes that the physiological nature of meditation is essentially awake sleep.
Meaning you are maintaining conscious awareness in your mind, but your physical body is undergoing the exact biological processes of falling asleep.
Applying the Popper stress test to that claim reveals the sheer impossibility of ever proving it definitively true.
Because of how complex the body is.
Exactly. To verify that meditation and sleep are biologically identical, researchers would need to measure every single physical and chemical variable in the human organism. Heart rate, respiration, thousands of intersecting hormone cascades.
Minute electrical brain patterns. You would have to line up all those thousands of variables and show a perfect one-to-one match between the meditating body and the sleeping body.
Which is basically a fool's errand. The human body is a spectacularly complex system, and science is perpetually uncovering new chemical messengers and microscopic interactions.
So we can never claim to have mapped every single physiological variable.
Right, meaning we can never confidently declare the two states are perfectly identical. Proof is out of reach.
But falsification is well within reach. And this is where the author actually dismantles their own initial theory using that very scientific method.
Yes, they do. The sources note that when observers study practitioners in extremely deep states of meditation, their metabolic metrics actually drop significantly lower than the baseline metrics of regular sleep.
Specifically breathing and heart rate, right?
Yeah. And the moment those variables diverge, the rules of falsifiability kick in. The hypothesis that meditation equals sleep fails the stress test.
Because the data contradicts the absolute claim.
Exactly.
Here's where it gets really interesting. If the body's metrics are dropping below the threshold of sleep, dipping into what the text describes as a hibernation-like state, isn't calling it sleep fundamentally inaccurate.
It is.
I mean, we aren't just taking a nap while remaining conscious. We are unlocking a completely different physiological gear.
The author reaches that exact conclusion, forcing a refinement of the theory. They pivot away from awake sleep to a new, sharper scientific model.
Okay, what is it?
That meditation is the practice of maintaining mental consciousness while allowing the physical body to enter a profound hibernation-like shutdown.
Wow. So it represents a massive biological shift, lowering the metabolic floor far beyond ordinary rest.
Which immediately presents the next logical puzzle. If meditation forces the physical body into this extreme, low-gear hibernation state, what is the mechanical trigger?
Right. How do we actually tell the body to pull that lever?
Well, the author's first attempt at answering that focused on complete physical stillness.
Just not moving at all.
Right. The theory posited that by rendering the body completely motionless, you deceive the unconscious brain. The unconscious systems monitor muscle activity, detect zero movement, and falsely conclude the body has initiated sleep.
So the unconscious brain takes that cue and starts altering the chemistry. It inhibits the sympathetic nervous system, dampening that active high alert state.
And heavily stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system, shifting into deep recovery mode.
That mechanism sounds plausible on paper. But returning to our framework, how do we break it? How do we falsify the theory that absolute stillness is the mandatory trigger for this physiological shift?
You find a black swan.
Yes.
Yeah.
And in this case, the black swan is walking meditation.
Exactly. This is a documented ancient practice where individuals enter profound parasympathetic dominant meditative states while slowly pacing.
They are undeniably moving.
Yes. Therefore, the theory that absolute stillness is the sole trigger is completely busted, falsified.
But the author doesn't retreat, though. They use the failure to build a much more sophisticated theory. The text introduces an incredible concept regarding how the body's built-in movement sensors actually function.
This concept completely shifted my perspective. The author suggests the internal sensors our unconscious brain relies on to determine whether we are moving or stationary operate almost identically to the sensors inside a modern smartwatch.
Wait, really? Like an Apple Watch?
Essentially, yeah. They are not measuring velocity, they are measuring acceleration. The body's biological hardware tracks the change in speed, not the speed itself.
Okay, I have to use an analogy here to make sure this lands. Think about riding on a high-speed bullet train. You are traveling at an immense velocity, hurtling through space.
But because that speed is perfectly uniform, there is zero acceleration.
Right, you can set a cup of coffee on the table and the surface of the liquid won't even tremble. If you close your eyes, your body feels as though you are sitting in a stationary room. You are effectively hacking your brain's internal speedometer.
That analogy captures the mechanics perfectly. When you engage in uniform linear motion, like maintaining a perfectly steady, unchanging walking pace, your acceleration is zero.
And the body's internal smartwatch registers that zero acceleration data and sends it to the unconscious brain.
Exactly. The brain reviews the data, notes the lack of acceleration, and concludes the body is stationary and ready for shutdown. It triggers the hibernation state, despite the velocity.
That is wild. You are literally exploiting a loophole in your own nervous system.
You are. And the text pushes this idea even further, pointing out that our internal acceleration sensors have limitations. They aren't perfectly sensitive.
So there is a threshold of detection.
Right. As long as the acceleration, the change in speed, remains extremely subtle and gentle, the unconscious brain remains oblivious to it.
It fails to register the minor fluctuations, allowing the deception to continue.
This brilliantly explains why practices like Tai Chi or Qigong are so effective.
Oh, because those disciplines rely on incredibly slow, flowing, continuous movements.
Exactly. It is not uniform linear motion like our walking example, but the acceleration is so minimal that the brain's biological sensors simply fail to pick it up.
So the author boldly concludes that Tai Chi and Qigong are not just martial arts. They are fundamentally forms of meditation exploiting the same biological loophole.
Synthesizing ancient traditions with these physiological theories reveals a fascinating dynamic. I mean, the original practitioners of Tai Chi or walking meditation possessed no working knowledge of the sympathetic nervous system.
Or internal acceleration sensors.
Right. Yet, through rigorous empirical trial and error, they discovered the precise biological backdoor required to trigger this profound hibernation state.
So if achieving zero, or near zero, acceleration is the singular physiological requirement to hack these sensors, the author takes us into a chapter titled The Ultimate Method.
And the claims in this section are going to challenge a lot of traditional practitioners.
For sure.
The author adopts a highly provocative stance. They argue that the vast array of intricate meditation techniques, like intense breath focus, complex visualizations,
Chanting specific mantras.
or the rigorous practice of observing your thoughts without judgment, they argue all of those are biologically unnecessary.
They propose that the only functional utility of those elaborate mental techniques is distraction.
Basically, yeah. You have a hyperactive modern mind that desperately wants to move the body.
So the techniques simply give the mind a chew toy, occupying it just long enough to allow the physical body to maintain that critical state of zero acceleration.
The hypothesis is stripped down to its absolute minimum. You can trigger the biological state of meditation exclusively through sustained physical stillness, bypassing the mental gymnastics entirely.
But we are operating strictly under Karl Popper's rules of science here. We need a stress test.
Always.
How do we attempt to falsify the claim that maintaining absolute physical stillness inevitably forces the biology into a meditative hibernation state?
Well, the author suggests a grand hypothetical experiment we can call the GUARD test.
Okay, what is the GUARD test?
The proposal is to locate military sentries or palace guards who have cumulatively spent over 1,000 hours standing at rigid attention, perfectly still.
Over 1,000 hours.
Right. If the zero acceleration theory holds true, simply by enduring that intense physical stillness, these veteran guards should have, at some point, spontaneously slipped into the deeply relaxed parasympathetic dominant state characteristic of meditation.
So theoretically, if we survey an entire regiment of veteran guards and find individuals who maintain that perfect stillness but have never spontaneously experienced that profound biological relaxation, the hypothesis breaks.
The stress test destroys the theory.
But the sources do inject a vital layer of statistical nuance into this test. Human biology resists absolute binary outcomes.
Yeah, we don't all react to identical stimuli at the exact same moment.
So the author clarifies that the 1,000 hours figure shouldn't be viewed as a rigid finish line. It's more like the mathematical expectation on a normal distribution, like a bell curve.
Right, because individual nervous systems are wired differently. Microscopic variations in nerve receptor sensitivity or baseline stress hormones mean one guard might hit that spontaneous meditative state after 800 hours of cumulative stillness.
While a more resistant nervous system might require 1,200 hours.
Exactly. The 1,000-hour mark is just the bulge in the center of the bell curve. So discovering a small percentage of outliers wouldn't instantly shatter the core theory. It would simply refine the shape of our statistical curve.
Okay, well, actually, I need to push back on the author's setup here because something about this GUARD test feels incomplete to me.
Oh, really? How so?
Think about a military sentry standing outside a palace. Yes, they are physically achieving zero acceleration, but their psychological state is entirely different from someone sitting on a cushion in a quiet room.
That's a good point. They are on duty.
Exactly. They are burdened with immense psychological pressure and the requirement of hypervigilance. Does that intense psychological tension completely override the biological zero acceleration trick? Like, can rigid physical stillness truly force the body to relax if the mind is actively flooding the system with stress hormones?
What's fascinating here is that you are actively participating in the scientific process the author is trying to promote. You just identified a massive, confounding variable, psychological tension, that possesses the potential to falsify the author's ultimate method.
Oh, I guess I did.
This is Popper's philosophy operating exactly as intended. Science is a continuous, relentless cycle of proposing a mechanism, actively trying to break it, discovering new variables like stress hormones, and refining the hypothesis.
That makes so much sense. The author isn't handing us a textbook of finished facts. They are inviting us to argue with the mechanics.
They are laying out the blueprints and challenging us to find the structural flaws. It really demands a shift in how we consume information. Science is not a static monument of unquestionable truths. It is a living, vulnerable process of perpetual refinement.
So what does this all mean for you as you navigate your own understanding of health and biology? We've journeyed from the philosophy of falsifiability through the biological concept of awake hibernation into the mechanics of our internal smartwatch sensors, and finally to the 1,000-hour GUARD test.
And the inescapable conclusion is that the author cannot guarantee any of these specific mechanisms are absolute facts. Given the staggering complexity of the human nervous system, they may remain unverified hypotheses forever.
But their lack of verification does not strip them of their value. Because the author constructed these theories to be highly falsifiable, they remain rigorously scientific.
The profound realization here is that you do not need the comfort of absolute guaranteed truth to apply scientific thinking to your life. The inherent value is found in the process of testing.
You have the ability to take these concepts, like utilizing low acceleration movements, to bypass your biological sensors and test them experimentally within the laboratory of your own body.
Which is incredibly empowering.
And that brings me to a final thought I want to leave you with, something that builds directly on the mechanics we've uncovered today.
Okay.
If our unconscious brain is genuinely this susceptible to being tricked into a profound pseudo-hibernation state simply by registering zero acceleration, what is the hidden cost of our modern, incredibly sedentary lives?
Oh, wow.
Think about your daily routine. When you sit frozen at a desk, staring intensely at a monitor for hours on end, Your body is enduring prolonged periods of absolute zero acceleration.
Are we inadvertently sending biological signals to our unconscious systems to initiate a shutdown?
Are you accidentally forcing your biology into a continuous state of microhibernation? I mean, we operate under the assumption that our chronic modern exhaustion is purely the result of mental burnout, psychological stress, or the glare of our screens.
But what if the exhaustion you feel at the end of a sedentary day is actually a direct biological side effect?
Exactly. What if your body is constantly attempting to pull the levers of deep meditation simply because you've stopped moving? And you are spending your entire day fighting against your own hibernation response.
It is a brilliantly unsettling and highly falsifiable hypothesis to consider.
Just something to chew on the next time you realize you haven't moved from your chair in 3 hours. Remember, our desire for clean, binary facts often obscures the reality of our own biology.
The mechanisms keeping us awake, asleep, or somewhere in between are wonderfully complex and murky. Keep testing the theories presented to you. Keep experimenting with your own routines.
And most importantly, keep questioning your world. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.